Good morning. Nice. Thank you very much. Welcome to the virtual and augmented reality panel, the technology that will change everything, not something, everything. You're in for a real treat today. We have an extremely distinguished panel who are developing technology, tools, and creative expertise covering a really wide spectrum of what makes VR and AR so transformative. Everything from immersive storytelling, 360 filming, spherical CG, visual effects, dimensionalized audio, real-time rendering, interactivity, motion tracking, and much more. So we'll try to hit on some technology as we move through and really try to get to the bottom of why we think VR and AR is such a change agent. Can I just start by asking, how many people here have experience in VR or AR? Okay, good. Who would say they have a lot of experience in VR and AR? Okay, great. So I think we have a very educated audience panel, so feel free to geek out all you want. I'm Robert Nashak. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Survios. We are one of the leading game developers in VR. In fact, in July, we launched on Steam Early Access a game called Raw Data. And if you've not had a chance to play it, I suggest you do. It's really fun. Yeah, you've played it? It's good, right? So Raw Data, it's been very successful. It's early access. What we did was we launched it on Steam. It immediately went to #1 on the VR charts, and it was the first VR title to hit the overall Steam charts as #1 worldwide. So it's on the HTC Vive, so imagine you're standing up and players are, their bodies are being tracked, their heads being tracked, their arms are being tracked. And I just wanted to bring up what I think, one clear example of what's changed for game developers like myself who've been in the business for a long time. So in VR, very different from other kinds of video games, you're not playing a character in a world, you are a character in the world. Concretely, with Raw Data, when you are, pistol whipping, or if you're playing a character like Gaija and you're using a sword, you are using a sword. You are pistol whipping. It's a sense of mastery that gets rid of the abstraction of the controller. So if you think of why, newbies hate Madden and Call of Duty, because it's so complicated to play, all that goes away in our kind of vision of VR, where natural movement is the way it goes. And so that to me is a real key difference, and it really does change things. In Raw Data, you're not mastering controller combos. You're mastering real actions in a real world. And when you're liberated like this, right? For example, when you find the Easter egg in Raw Data that lets you climb up a huge crane that's hanging over a city, and I'm totally afraid of heights. It's an amazing emotional experience. You start breathing heavily, emotions start to fly, endorphins fire. All of your systems, including your reptilian brain, are just going off at a mile a minute. So they're all engaged, and I think that's a huge difference, and something that and the people that we see playing in VR are really influenced by. So if you ask our designers at Survios what's the biggest change that VR technology has brought to games, what's most exciting to them is that they're not just making games, they're making reality. And before we go to the panel, one quick concrete example. We just hired an amazing, very senior programmer who was working at Blizzard for the last 10 years, working on games like World of Warcraft and StarCraft, which are basically PC games with a mouse and a keyboard. And I asked him, what's the biggest difference coming to Survios and doing VR? And he said, the user experiences we had to account for really were all about mastering the keyboard and the mouse. Now, every motion possible is in play. And for him, this is a mind-boggling experience and really changing the way he thinks about game development and the way games will move forward in the future. But today we've got a panel that should do much more of the talking than myself. So what I'm going to ask them to do is go down the line, please, and just introduce yourself relatively quickly, and then we'll swoop back and give you some time, like 5 minutes or whatever, to deep dive a little bit into what you're up to and why you think it's so exciting and why you think it's potentially a change agent. So can we start with you?
Hey everyone, I'm Chen. I am the executive technical producer at Here Be Dragons, formerly known as VerseWorks. Prior to that, I was the product lead at Oculus before I decided to make the transition into content and focus on trying to bring new technologies and work with creatives and artists here in Hollywood and other places. You can see a lot of our work on the Within app and maybe other places.
My name is Andy Cochran. I'm a digital and interactive director, and what that means is I'm going to be called an experience designer in a few years when that's the title applied to what I do. It basically means taking technology and creating immersive and interactive experiences for audiences across mediums such as apps, VR, AR, installations, live events, basically anywhere that we can kind of make an experience for an audience using the latest in technology.
Hi, everybody. I am the co-founder and CEO of Prologue Immersive, and we focus on creating original IP for VR, educational pieces, interactive gaming, and data visualization.
Hi, I'm the SVP Content Strategy and Co-Pros for Machinima. Machinima, for those who do not know, is one of the largest social video companies in the world. So the last 12 years, we produced around 400 series for digital, but also television, both. We're quite active in the eSports area, but also obviously VR, first inroads. It's heavily hyped, so I'd love to hear more what that means and to get a reality check. I'm super excited about it. Yes, it will change the world, but I think small steps. And also, I think we need to discuss what shouldn't we do in VR, what is better off in HD, Ultra HD, where you don't necessarily need a 360 space, but very excited to be here.
That's great. Thank you, panelists. So let's start with you, Joe. I mean, if you don't mind, I mean, you were basically employee number 10 at Oculus. Is that correct?
Yeah, once upon a time.
Maybe a little bit of history of your career moving into what you're doing now with Here Be Dragons would be helpful, and then just talk about whatever you'd like.
I want to start losing that number. It seems kind of embarrassing in hindsight now.
Sorry.
But no, it's all right. Because it was a scrappy group back then.
Yeah,
It was a very tight group, similar to how we find ourselves kind of early on in pre-production before we scale up for actual full production. The life cycles, I find right now, are even faster than we expected even back then. We were always trying to push out a new prototype, and if those of you that got to see Oculus Connect a couple weeks ago, it's kind of returned to that form, that past glory of like, hey, here's a future prototype. It's not going to be a product for years, but this is a little slice of what's going to be possible with technology that are still very, very experimental at this point. And that's what was exciting for us back then. And I look at content now, and that's kind of, there's a similar excitement because of the unknown, not just the unknown about the tools, but the creative, or even the reception. I mean, we can feel great about one of our works and then it just falls flat. It doesn't ring. Like we put it in front of people, or then they put it on and they try it and they're like, it doesn't feel right. And that's really that litmus test, and that's ultimately why we have been so prolific, is because you have to, like, you can sit here with a bunch of smart people in a room and sit there and write and have this beautiful writer's room, have amazing developers, amazing cinematographers, put it all together, editors, and then nobody will care about it because, and you won't know that until you actually ship it, learn painfully from that, ship another one, your fourth piece will probably be terrible, but then you'll finally start getting the hang of it, and then by that time you're bored and you want to try something new. And that's ultimately the challenge that we put forth to our, I call them directors, we call them creators, world builders, whatever they are now in these new mediums, is that, hey, give this a try. Here's something you're somewhat familiar with. Let's figure out how the writing works, how the cinematography works. But ultimately, right now, what we're seeing is technologies emerging, whether that's volumetric video or light field or some sort of mix between that allows us to get the photorealism in real-time game engine where you guys live and bridge that gap, because a lot of the times we do get that aversion to game engine, not just because, hey, it's a video game, I have no idea what I'm doing in this, from a lot of established directors, but also in that it lacks the photorealism that they want, that immediacy of like, I recognize that person, I want to know that person, or I don't like that person. And just the caricature, or the characterization of a non-realistic person is one of the challenges that have kind of kept us out of real time, but we're starting to see that round the corner, unless you want to be abstracted in your art style. So that's really what I'm excited about, again, and kind of reflecting back upon my history at Oculus, where game engine was VR. I mean, 360 video is kind of this test bed, and it's not going anywhere. I don't want anyone to think that, like, oh, we're not shooting 360 video ever again. That is going to become a medium in its own right, and I love where it's going right now because, I'm sorry, I'm rambling now, but the gimmick is gone, and to rise to the top, like just to get any eyeballs at all, your content has to be really, really strong. Whereas now, real time is starting up that curve as well, where the gimmicky games are no longer, that are sifting to the bottom of Steam, where yours is to the top, and that's really where the competition ultimately advances not just their own content, but the medium in general. So.
That's great. Which of your projects are you most proud of to date?
Oh, it's funny, like you look back and like, we've been around for 2 years, we've probably put out about, I think we're over 70 pieces now, so like it's hard to look back and like say, holy, how did we do 2 or 3 pieces a month? But we ended up doing that, and looking back 2 years ago, I still think Clouds Over Sidra, as crude and primitive as it was the first live action thing we ever shot and produced. I look back at some of those shots, and they were shot blind. We didn't have preview back then. We didn't have headsets to block and we just, like amazing cinematographer and director, just shot it blind. And we did all the work in the edit, and it still resonates with me the most, maybe because it was the first thing I saw, though, that I really liked. Mm-hmm. And so that was actually one of the first pieces that made me think, hey, you know what, 360 video has a place in VR, because again, I was a purist coming from Oculus, and I'm like, no, 360 video is a bastardization of this tech that we've been slaving away for years. But then I saw something that literally made me cry in a press room, and I'm sitting here holding this headset to my face during the credit roll because I got to gather myself before somebody takes a photo of me with like tears rolling down my face. And that impacted me, and so that has stuck with me. We've tried to kind of capture that lightning in a bottle over and over again. Sometimes we miss, sometimes we hit, and I don't know. But yeah, I think that's my favorite still.
That's great, and thanks for being here today. Andy, a bit about what you're working on and sort of what gets you excited in VR, if you don't mind.
Sure. So we've done a really wide range of projects over the past 2 years in terms of production, but actually we started our R&D kind of in secret when the DK1 came out. So it's coming up on what, 4 years now, 3.5 since the DK1 shipped, something like that. We took a slightly different approach to a lot of folks, which was we had a mandate, which was essentially we're already creating content sort of at the top of the game in terms of commercials, music videos, feature films. We just finished Pacific Rim. We did the first 2 minutes of that film. And so when VR when we were first trying out the Oculus and going, oh, I think we can actually do this. Like we can do live action in this. We can do CG in this. We can do the things we do in this. There's always been a mandate from the top, which is, we're not going to put something out that's low quality just because it's new. So we'll do this if we can do this at the same level of quality. And so we basically had to spend 2 years before we could go out to clients and say, hey, we can do this. So in terms of the experiences we've done, there's a really wide variety. We did a virtual tour for Google. That was the first time anybody had done stereospherical live action, seamlessly composited with stereospherical environments. Some people had put kind of CG characters into spherical or stereospherical video, but nobody had done a full VFX pipeline actually replace an environment and make a seamless piece. That was also interactive. You could kind of choose where you wanted to go within this space. To this day, there's still only a small handful of 360 video-based projects that have included interactivity, and that was the first thing that we did. That was sort of the end of our 2-year R&D process. So insanely proud of that one, just from the standpoint of we kind of came out of the gate swinging, but not because we were kind of figuring it out as we had gone, but because we had done the homework, and it was sort of the proof that we had done the homework. And then after that, we did a piece for The Strain, which was really phenomenal. I'm still insanely proud of that one, just from the standpoint of being very first person. It was one of the first pieces that had camera movement. Our own work included had not moved the camera very much because it's very expensive once you start moving the camera if you want to clean stuff up. And then from there, we've done pieces we did the logo for Jump. So every Jump video on YouTube 360 is our logo. Most recently finished a piece with Within and Here Be Dragons for Mr. Robot. Did a bunch of the posts on that. And we've done a variety of stuff. We've done all live action, we've done all CG, pre-rendered, we've done all real time, and we've done mixes of the three. We definitely believe in the future of light fields and real-time rendering, and we believe very firmly in it. But coming from a sort of more traditional film, TV background, we're always going to be stronger with real actors, real sets, real costumes, VFX, CG. There's companies like Ubisoft that have phenomenal render engines that they have spent decades refining. They're going to do amazing work in real time, and so our focus has really been to stick with our strengths, which is sort of more film, TV, commercial, music video sorts of production processes, and less things that look exactly like a video game. That said, we use game engines, and we are not opposed to real-time rendering, but we're trying to kind of come at this space from our place of strength instead of trying to fight giants with decades of experience, with us being, at the starting point.
Thanks, Andy. Kimberly, could you give a deep dive into what you're up to?
Yes. So at Prologue Immersive, we started out, our first piece was an educational piece. It's called Science 360. It takes you through Einstein's theory of relativity, which is kind of a complicated subject to explain to someone or for someone to read about. So we wanted to create this experience where people can put the headset on and actually go through Einstein's theory of relativity. And this was done in about 3 weeks. We did it for the Oculus Jam, and we got, the top 20 experiences. And a lot of people wrote in about that experience saying, wow, I actually really learned something, and I really wish we had this in college, or I wish I had this in high school. And, after I saw the experience myself, I realized, wow, VR is such a powerful tool that you can actually have an experience, learn something, and come away with it because you're actually absorbing the information a lot quicker than if someone's trying to explain it to you and then you're trying to visualize what they're saying. So that piece was done in a game engine with all just illustrations. We didn't use any type of 3D because of the schedule we had, and it was just a 3-man team. And after that, we jumped into something that we've never done before, which is a stop-motion animated 360 3D printed film, and it's called Memos from Hell. And all these characters, my partner Kyle Cooper designed, they're about a foot tall, and they were all 3D printed and hand painted, and so we wrote this script about this story, and it was referenced from C.S. Lewis's book, The Screwtape Letters, which is about these demons, and their goal is to obviously, get our souls. So it's this senior demon talking to a junior tempter on, his, how he's going to capture a soul, which he calls the humans a patient. And so it's this experience in hell, and it's in a boardroom, and the camera is in the middle of the table. And because the characters were only about 12 inches tall, we had to find a camera small enough to shoot these characters. And so we used the Ricoh Theta camera, which is only about this big. It's really small. And we shot this frame by frame and animated each character. What we learned from that is, usually when you have a set, you build half the set and the crew's on one side and the set's on the other. And we realized that didn't work because obviously the set's going to be in the shot. So we had to build an actual 360 set that was completely enclosed. And then we realized, okay, how are we going to get in the set to manipulate these characters? So we had to build a kind of like a trap door underneath and go in from underneath and then animate the characters. And so that was challenging. And then we also realized, okay, we can't really use typical lights that you use to light a set. And so we actually had to build lights that are in the set and in the shot to light the set. So there were many things we learned. We tried also filming the characters against a green screen and then shooting the set separately and putting it together to add dimension. And that didn't work. So we had to redo everything and shoot the set and the characters all together. So that was just something like, I think VR is something you just dive into. You have no idea about how it works or what it is. And it's kind of like a relationship. It's like you fall in love with someone, but you don't know all the issues they have, and suddenly you realize, oh, you can't just bring in that 3D model from the film, or oh, you can't just animate typography and bring it in from After Effects, or all these issues you realize, but you're in love with this thing. But you just keep fighting and figuring it out. And so we're also working on some data visualization projects, trying to build what we've done in Iron Man to life in VR, so I'm really excited about that. And also, finally, after 3 years, we're starting to get real projects from some of our clients. Excuse me. We recently just helped TNT show Major Crimes, help them with their VR series by helping them put together their footage from the Kodak camera, the 360 Kodak camera, to the Ozo camera, and stitching it, color correcting it, compositing it, adding effects and the spatial audio. So we completely know how to do all the post for 360 filmmaking. So that was exciting. And then also just diving into, how do you build a interactive VR experience game using a game engine? And so, we've dove into using Unity, and that didn't seem to really work, so we're changing it to Unreal. And I think, trying things in game engines. Certain projects require certain game engines. So if you want something more data and interactive, I'd say use the Unity game engine. If you want something to look really, have nice lighting and textures, I'd say use the Unreal Engine. And I think, like you talked about, we come from a VFX film background, and it's really difficult to get our work that we do in film and visual effects to look as good in VR. It's one of our struggles, and it's a very frustrating struggle that we go through every day. And
Is that because you're trying to hit 90 frames per second?
that's one of the reasons, but it's just really difficult to come away without having to have your project look like it's built in a game engine. Yeah. It's really difficult. Yeah. So.
It's also the audience is looking at your work 400% zoomed in, able to see single pixel discrepancies or stereo disparities. So, especially on a mobile device, 4K stereo at 30 or maybe if you're lucky 60 frames per second is nowhere near enough. Lay people can see matte lines. Lay people can see, incorrect stereo. That's not true on the big screen. That's not true on TV. So the work is undergoing a level of scrutiny that it's unfair.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to meet that level of quality on a freaking big screen.
Right.
Like a $500 million tentpole has less pixel peeping than a VR experience on a cell phone.
And you think about games, in a normal video game, you come across a gun, there's a few animations associated with that gun, and that's about it, you're shooting. In VR, people pick the gun up, they look at it, they toy with it, they flip it around, they do all sorts of stuff, all of which requires a level of detail that really impacts your team having to optimize every single asset, every single thing they do. So I love that. I love your point, Kimberly, about also the R&D aspect of what we're all doing.
Yeah.
Like my team was totally had to struggle with how much collision detection do you do in a room, for example? Do we actually prevent people from walking through walls? It's never nice to prevent people from doing stuff, but we realized it's a real environment. People don't walk through walls in a real environment, so they won't walk through our walls. We don't have to worry too much about it. So there's all that kind of learning that we're all doing. Let's turn to Jorg next.
Yeah, just to add, I totally agree, it's early days, but also the quality even has to be better, what you just said, than 2D versions, because it's not traditional media. This is a 360 environment. You cannot apply classic storytelling themes to a 360 environment. I think it's more like an open world in gaming, so where you go through scenarios, but you also just stroll around and just experience, the area, and then also just to set the stage. I think we have to think about: do we use traditional kind of cinematics, what a video game is doing, to set the stage that the user, the fan, starts to get used to where he is and what he's actually doing and what he can expect, from the experience. Probably yes, you should do something. No, you shouldn't. You really have to guide them a bit through the scenario. I don't think against classic storytelling will apply for this area. Why I even joined Machinima is I'm an immersive gamer. I'm not a competitive gamer. The kids out there would kill me in a split second. I have no chance. But I love to deep dive into very rich, graphic-rich world like an Assassin's Creed or Fallout 4. And I think the industry definitely needs its Pokemon moment for VR, you know, where you walk, and I just need to walk into an old London Assassin's Creed or Paris. I don't even need to do anything there, I just want to be there. But we're not there yet from exactly what do you do then in this space, but I think we're very close to it. So Machinima, yes, we also build a VR studio. We do a lot of Let's Play videos, so from single player, multiplayer. What excites me a lot is seeing now the influencer. Machinima is also an MCN, so we have a lot of influencers, around 20,000. To see them now in the space, in their game, seeing them in Minecraft, where they're very passionate about it, but also seeing them goofing around because they're not used to being in their environment. This is brilliant. That's why I'm so passionate about VR. It's not frozen in time cinematic, it's you're there. And I just on Friday with Irad, who sits here in the audience, we saw Star Wars, and seeing the Millennium Falcon landing next to you, it's just breathtaking. It's epic, and you feel you don't get the wind and all that and the dust in your eyes, but still you feel different, and that's what I love with VR. But all that said, I think it's still a small step to really go there. But good news, I think we're very close.
That's great. Thank you for bringing up storytelling, because that's where I wanted to go next. So let's think about change and what VR and AR could do. You know, what kind of change is it actually bringing on the horizon, either from a technology standpoint or whatever you'd like to talk about. And Andy, if you don't mind, I'll start with you, because I read somewhere that you gave a speech where you started by saying storytelling is dead.
In VR.
Perhaps you could elaborate.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually the word telling that's dead. Story is not dead, but telling is dead in this medium. If it's a first-person medium, you're not telling anything. You're creating an environment. Ideally, you're creating hopefully a narrative experience. The story that is told is when the person takes the headset off and tells their friend what they just did, what they just saw, what they just experienced. So that's why I said in the beginning, I'm currently a director, which is a fancy way of saying experience designer, because I think for these immersive and interactive mediums where your audience is the protagonist, they might be the antagonist, but they are the main character of their own story. It's not about telling anything. It's not about. I love all the hand wringing that old Hollywood is doing right now. Spielberg had a great quote where he was like, "This is a very dangerous medium for us creators." No, it's not. It's a very dangerous medium if you don't want to work in it. You know, a lot of people are like, "How do we get them to look where we want them to look? How do we make sure that they see what we need them to see?" I don't know, make a good experience and, you know, have option, put things in a place that makes sense, make it inevitable. There's a lot of sort of like old thinking of, this is my frame, this is my edit, this is what you will watch, this is what I want you to see. I'm going to control lensing and focus and lighting and sound so that you see and hear in the order, frame by frame, exactly what I want you to see. And I manipulate you and I manipulate your emotions and I swell the music at the perfect moment. That's gone. Those techniques are not gone. You know, we're still going to use cameras. We're still going to use lighting. We're still going to create environments. Still going to have actors. Still going to have dialogue. But the user, the participant, the guest, whatever you want to say, is the main character of it, is the main focus. They're literally the only thing that matters. The entire thing is about them. And it's all about sort of creating a playground for them. You know, it's not about watching Harry Potter grow up. It's about being Harry Potter. It's about being Indiana Jones. You know, it's about being the chosen one yourself. And so that's where we're headed. We're headed, honestly, we're headed to amusement parks. But to say, when you say that normally, like, oh, it's just like kind of like installation design or a haunted house or an amusement park, people go, oh, well, those aren't very good. That's the wrong thinking. They're not very good currently, but there's lessons there. They know how to onboard an audience. The Transformers ride up at Universal, you know actually who you are. You're not given a name, but you know that you're in a secret facility that's under attack and the Transformers are trying to get you out there. It's first person. It's an adventure that you're taking on. Indiana Jones ride is pretty similar. You're less strongly charactered. But those are the types of experiences that we need to be looking at and listening to and picking the best stuff of, not recreating. It's not about making the Indiana Jones ride in VR. It's about realizing that the hour that you stand in line is actually part of the experience if it's done right. The ride is absolutely part of the experience. What happens after the ride is part of the experience. We're going to be creating stories. They're not going to look like films. They're not going to be linear. They're not going to be non-interactive. But they are gonna sort of steal from games, steal from films, steal from play, interactive theater, all of these things into this new amalgam that we're just kind of figuring out right now, because the tech's the tech sucks. The tech's gonna suck for decades.
Is that the quote from the panel?
Yeah, the tech sucks. But it's amazing. It's amazing. Like a cell phone and a cardboard headset is kind of on par with the DK1 in terms of experience, and that's phenomenal. That amount of increase in technology in such a short amount of time is astounding. And if you just extrapolate that, we're going to be in full body haptic suits, and it'll be like Lawnmower Man, but better graphics. But it's going to take a while to get there. The journey is going to be amazing. We're figuring it out. Everything that's being created today is amazing, and it will suck next week when the new amazing thing comes out. And that's going to suck the week after that.
Oh, question from the
It's gonna
audience.
suck for
Yeah.
us.
Question kind of along the same lines of the conversation with storytelling and the new media and things of that nature. How does this, specifically for your video, for a studio like Machinima that kind of started out as video games and all these kinds of things, and was literally the biggest thing on YouTube at one point, and nobody could even touch them, kind of pivoting into a new age where not always reviews might not reflect, the content and the effort behind it and stuff like that. So my question is, with these new medium, the new VR AR studio that you guys have built, how does this give you, new possibilities to engage the viewer, refresh your brand, tell a new story, not from a simple perspective as this is AR VR, it's built in, but specifically towards your brand, how does this refresh everything and give you kind of new opportunities?
No, very, very good comment. The good old times. Two things. Just one comment. We evolved, obviously, being more multimedia. So we go now more, creating a Transformer series, a Street Fighter. We still look very deeply into the game culture and geek culture to fit to the Machinima audience. But we also have to evolve beyond social media, on many other platforms, Comcast, Go90, Sony View, Sohu in China, and so on. So, but I still agree with you, big time. So Machinima, as probably a lot of you know, is derived from machine and cinema. And we're very used to work in this 360 space to recreate imaging and put it pretty much on social media, put new content out there. I would ask, we are the home of, if you talk about Machinima VR, that's us. So do it. I can only encourage you to do it. There's big appetite. Not everything is figured out in terms of business models. So we do a lot of mixed reality right now to go into the existing business models because somebody has to pay for it. It's a bit the chicken and egg. Nobody wants to invest, but we want, of course, to Fallout 4. I love to see it. But I hope you are part of the Machinima network and do it. Go out there, create it, and you will be seen. That's the beauty of this medium. Spot on.
It's interesting because we actually start looking at what you guys have done in terms of utilizing game assets and creating cinema out of them effectively for a rectangular YouTube channel. We do a lot of previs, especially for our more complex shots. A lot of those are game engine, if not other programs. But one of the things that we started, it was just a simple question. It's like, why is this not good enough for us to publish at this point? And it was just fidelity, and that's artists, and that's just developer time. So if all that's already done in a game engine for an existing release IP, can we basically do what you guys have done and get a really strong writer's room to do some just interesting experiments script-wise, and then script together a piece and effectively pre-visit, but then polish it to the point where, hey, this is actually good enough. Let's put this out there in the world, which is effectively what that model is. And with all those assets kind of pre-placed, I think that's very feasible, not just from a studio standpoint, but also from an individual content creator standpoint.
Yeah, I can only say yes. I mean, the good enough, I learned that big time. Robert and I worked for BBC Worldwide, where the quality aspect of content is very high and absolutely appreciated. There's no doubt about it. But also what I wanted to learn at Machinima is what does it mean good enough, Let the audience out there decide, because the platform is there. What is Machinima? The platform is such. Get it out there and find out if you find the audience, and probably you find, if the quality is good. Of course, the hurdle content gets better and better, you know, and I see brilliant content from influencers who work on shoestring budgets. It's unbelievable. I have a lot of respect for that. They bring something what professionals in this industry have less is time. I get that part, but still, it's beautiful what I see, and that's how the industry evolves too, you know, to take these good first moments, of course use game engines to recreate, to think about how would entertainment look like in this VR space in the future, or mixed reality, or do both, you know, just as a tip to get monetized. But absolutely big yes, and then get distributed and find an audience.
That's great. So the rise of the game engine for a previs tool is so exciting to me. Kimberly, you guys have thought a lot about the use of game engines for, you know, optimizing asset creation and all that. Do you mind speaking to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So our experience coming from a film visual effects background and then jumping into the game engine world is kind of really different, and it's been a little bit shocking and frustrating at the same time. You know, some of the things that we've come up with, you know, walls are just, you know, why can't we bring some of the assets that we have from our film projects into the game engines just like that? And you can't, because they're built with just, you know, all these millions of polygons, and you have to, you know, you have to just have it VR friendly. So we have to take 3D assets and make them VR friendly, which is another step in the process. And, you know, kind of mapping that out and then looking at it, and then also getting frustrated that the way we built it in, you know, our film and visual effects projects, it doesn't look the same. And so there's a lot of time in developing the lighting, the look, the textures, and then you have to deal with the frame rate, because, you know, obviously you don't want to make people sick, and you can have this beautiful scene, but if it's not running at the right frame rate, then you're going to have all these people, you know, vomiting when they're watching your VR piece. So that's another frustrating piece. So, you know, there's all these like little technical, not little, but frustrating issues that we're learning because we don't come from a game background. So, and I think it's a combination of the two. I think it's a combination of game background and film and visual effects background coming together and trying to, you know, work on these kinds of design and concept challenges to bring something amazing and beautiful to this VR world.
Super excited to see that you brought on as a advisor Hideo Kojima.
Yes.
How's that going?
Yes. That's amazing. So yeah, yesterday we went to Valve together and checked out some great things happening there, and we're really excited about Hideo being our advisor. And that's the other thing. It's that, so Hideo is our advisor, which makes the quality of our work even that much. The bar is now higher. Let's just put it that way. So it's not like we just can make something and put it out there. We've really got to make it right, make it look good, make it function right, and so we are just, you know, just scrutinizing everything we do, and which makes it more challenging.
Absolutely. So my favorite moment at BBC was when we integrated Top Gear, the racing show, into Microsoft's Forza racing game. And they recreated the Top Gear camera angles from the TV show. And my favorite moment was showing the executives at BBC the TV show side by side with the game. And they could not tell which was which. And we're still not there yet in VR, but that's like the holy grail for me, right? I know, like, some of you are interested, like I liked it, you mentioned the science thing. I'm interested in simulations. I just went down to CXC, and I think it's El Segundo, and they do big boy toys. They basically kit out the cockpits of cars, and then they have lots of haptic feedback. You put on an Oculus, and all of a sudden you're on a racetrack racing, and it is heart-pounding. Has anyone done it? Heart-pounding, right? Scary as hell. Awesome. And I know some of you have been involved in that and thought about simulations. I'm just wondering if you could speak to that. Maybe you could start?
Yeah, actually I was leading a lot of the non-gaming developer relations at Oculus back then, which included, at the time, entertainment and then simulation, whether that's military or other aspects of sport where simulation, like for instance motorsports, a lot of the F1 simulator teams, and then also beyond simulations and, I mean flight simulators for the military and then ground troop simulators, but then beyond that, reaching out back into education, and like those are areas that that are outside, I guess, the purview of what we think about as the booming entertainment trend for VR, but they're perfectly valid verticals that are of varying depth. I mean, you can probably own the simulator market and still just be, what, 100,000 out there in the world. But looking at things like education, I'm just like stunned that that is just now picking up, because that was, in my head, the third vertical that was going to take off after gaming and then entertainment would be education, because the confluence of it and then the everyday use of it and the lifelong use of it is just massive in terms of actual touches of content. So I'm really excited that you guys are working on stuff like that. I'm excited about that. I come from education technology back in the day. But going back into simulators, and I think this also kind of alludes to something Andy mentioned, is one of the design philosophies that we always looked at in anything when we were working on the actual physical hardware was this concept of 0 seconds to fun, which was very pertinent to gaming, kind of less pertinent in other areas, but this frictionless interface to the virtual world, which is absolutely critical if we're going to get any adoption. And friction is also dollars, like the friction of my wallet when I spend thousands of dollars on this system, right? So trying to get as high a quality experience to as many people as possible without them having to suit up and put on these insane gloves, and even something as simple as headphones. Like, that was something that we're like, okay, this is a pain in the ass to try to put on headphones blind and Scrabble for them on my table. So how do we kind of ease that friction? And I think that's absolutely critical, because for simulation to filter in the games, and we're seeing that some of the best games out there right now are things like flight simulators or space simulators or racing simulators, because it is kind of that low-hanging fruit. It is that obvious choice of, if I'm in VR, I want to be first person. If I'm first person, I want to do this thing. I would challenge everybody here, because we challenge ourselves with this all the time, and I think there was a mention of this earlier. It's like, why are we doing this in VR? And are we trying to be obvious? I mean, I kind of hate that, in fact. I look at scripts. We look at scripts all the time, and a lot of them, they're just really, really freaking obvious. Like, oh, I want to be first person. I want to do this superhero thing. And I'm like, no, you don't. Like, I don't. I mean, you're trying to preach to me like I want to be Batman or Superman. Maybe I don't some days. Maybe I want to sit back and watch a master storyteller. And this is where I'll argue with Andy on this. There are master storytellers out there. Storytelling, I think, is different. I don't think it is gone. I think that the margin for error is definitely tighter now, and you have to kind of accept that the audience will miss parts of your story, and you have to construct parallel stories or a variety of stories that all make sense cohesively somehow if the audience decides to go AWOL and go check out a wagon cart over in the corner. That is the fundamental challenge that makes this the dangerous medium or the challenging medium for traditional filmmakers. Some of them are not willing to let go of that baggage. We see it every day. Even people that think that, like, oh, VR is awesome, I'm gonna go jump into it, I'm gonna shift the gears all the way into VR. And then they come to us with very, very traditional ideas, and a lot of the times we just have to show them that that doesn't work, and then they rethink it. You have to kind of go through that pain process a lot of the times, especially with someone that has, sometimes it's baggage, sometimes it's just a lot of experience making beautiful things in a rectangle, in order to get them thinking about the problems in a different way, and thinking about new problems, and then thinking about things like third person. We landed on third person, not because we wanted to. Everybody's dream is that first person, like their initial thought is that first person. We're seeing it in games now. Like, everybody's like, oh, let's go play Call of Duty in VR. No, like a year later, we've had this discussion since like 2012, 2013. It takes a while for even very, very smart people at very, very established game studios to let go of that initial predilection towards what they've been doing or what they've been dreaming about since they were a kid watching the holodeck. Now there are lots of obvious options. There's lots of not so obvious options, and the only way you get to those not so obvious options, which is where I really think the Pokemon or the killer app or whatever for VR or AR is going to come from, is by taking some of those obvious steps, some of those not obvious steps, because only then can you see there from where you're standing. From here, we don't even know what it is yet.
Let me just jump on one thing there. I think simulations are, We need a Ferrari. We need a reason. Why on earth would you buy a $2,000 gaming PC that you're only going to use for VR? Dedicate your living room, your basement, your rec room to this massive room scale thing. The reason you're going to do those things, and that will drive demand, and now we've got a user base, and now we can monetize and have those conversations, is if you go to the Void, or you go to an arcade, or you go to the mall, and they've got this, like, they've got the haptics, they've got the gloves, they've got they've got all the things that make no sense at a mass consumer level. IMAX is just about to open their first, VR theater experience in the UK. I believe really strongly in those things, not as the only future, but as the sort of the thing that makes you want to run out and go get your own. The thing that makes people say, how do I do that? And the answer can sometimes be just get a $1 cardboard headset, the phone that's in your pocket, and go download a free app. You can do it. But to get people...
But is that quality enough for...
Absolutely. Everything's quality enough. I've had very moving experiences with very, on paper, shitty, headsets, and it's all about content. You can tell a story with a piece of paper. You can tell a story with your voice. You can move people. We're not like sort of... Everyone just needs to hit pause and wait a decade until this stuff doesn't suck, and then we can do good things. We can do great things today. We could do things 4 years ago, but the big installations, the big motion simulators, the vibrating chairs, the South by Southwest installations, they're a critical piece of the overall ecosystem from the standpoint of they create an impossible to recreate in your home experience. An amazing PC, a motion chair, best headset ever, attendants to tell you what's going on, to make sure that you're pointed in the right direction. All the things that, you're making raw data right now. I guarantee you there's things you wish you could do, but you have to go a little more generic. You can't make assumptions that everyone's going to understand this. Everyone's going to have both controllers turned on. Everybody's going to, have their room properly calibrated, know how to teleport. We get to the point where we can start making those assumptions when there's enough demand and enough volume, and we get to there by showing people how amazing it could be. And kind of the best way to do that is to target 1,000 people over 3 days with like a really good installation. I'm not saying that's all we should do, but I'm saying they're very important. I believe in them really strongly.
Well, there's a lot of activity in that sector right now.
I also think you need to tailor the experience to the device right now. You're, of course, quite limited with the cardboard right now, where the Vive and the Rift has other opportunities and possibilities, and also go beyond a gimmick or just a marketing stunt. We love the marketing dollars right now. Don't get me wrong, that's one of the few things. And as we published our Transformer series, we also did deep dive in VR in the 3D mesh of one of the Transformers, and that's all good and people like it, but it's not sustainable. So if you need to start tailoring, the big screen, the bigger screen, the Vive, the mobility, all that. And what I said earlier, what I miss still in this, do we want storytelling in VR and what is it? Why VR? Why do you use the 360 space? It's a different medium, completely different. Why do I want to walk in there? Right now I see a lot of replications of existing stuff. Oh, horror genre, easy. It's so easy to scare somebody anyway in the video game, so let's do it in VR. It's also borderline not responsible. We have to think about that too for 2 seconds. But why 360? And for me, this is a brand new world, we can go into. Show this world, and use the space actually in this world, but also take your audience with you, because they might not be on your development stage, what you feel VR is, because nobody really, not a lot of people experience it. Here are a lot of pros in this audience, but the mass, the devices are not even out there, in mass media.
I think that's good to note. Did you have a comment? Okay.
In designing games, have you guys thought about not the players, but the audiences playing? Because eSports have an opportunity to do something that real sports can't, which should make them a breakthrough for audience, which is design properly a game can put the viewer on the field with the action. Somebody can watch an NBA game and be on the court with the players, or somebody can watch a football game knowing they're not going to get hurt. An incredible
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the driving force in VR will be first video gaming, then live events, and then probably video entertainment. And esports has all three components. Only esports itself is also a new phenomenon. It's massive, but still fairly new. And yes, that's why it lives on Twitch or YouTube gaming. But absolutely right, you can go right into the games. You can have mixed reality about the outcome, of these events. You can be at the live event, or you even play along pretty much as an amateur with the pros. So a lot of opportunities and working on it.
Yes.
Yes. If you look back, I don't know if it's been publicly released. I haven't seen it in a while, but one of the first things Valve ever did was give you spectator mode in Dota, right?
Yeah.
And that was critical because, quite honestly, the mechanics of Dota, if you tried to play them in first-person VR, you probably wouldn't do very well. There are some games that work very, very well where VR is an advantage. I don't think Dota is one of those, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. That's one of those points where, just like I love that question of why are we doing this in VR? It's more expensive, less people are going to see it, but also one of those questions of if we are going to do it in VR, who is your audience? Do they have to be first person? And I'd argue that that's one of those opportunities to where it's actually better to be third person. It's better to watch. I'd much rather watch a pro gamer sit there and just demolish the field than me try to do that same effect, even if I had all the tools. Like if it just doesn't have that same impact, than to just kind of behold the spectacle of this master freaking crush it, right? But then at the same time, do I wish I could do that? Yeah, but like the agency and the onus is on me to perform now, and so for some reason that dynamic with the audience is fundamentally different if you're trying to effectively impact them.
There's several companies that essentially build middleware that sits on top of spectator mode. There's companies that make sort of in-game camera rigs that allow traditional camera operators to film the game. I know that there's several of those sort of like middleware integrator companies that are certainly very interested in that future. And more specifically, any game developer that has a game in which there is a spectator mode would be really silly to not be at least thinking as a thought exercise what might be possible. Because as you said, a third person perspective, I mean, that's what spectator mode is. It's third person, omniscient, floating around. It's a slam dunk for VR. I know that there are people working on it. There's not a lot of people out there watching VR. So it's, like I agree live streaming is going to be big, but live streaming right now is like Real Player in like the mid 90s. It's buffering, and there's 200 people watching. So yes, it's going to be very big. People are watching esports right now, but the pieces haven't naturally joined together yet in terms of the audience that is dying to consume this. Absolutely, but they're not all. They don't all own Vives or PSVRs or Oculuses or. That's what I mean by the pieces have not naturally joined together yet. There's probably 4 pieces there that need to be connected that are trying to join together. It's going to take a while. It's just going to take a while, but when it does, it's going to be amazing.
Another question? Could you speak up a little bit?
I think you're talking about player identity. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I think that's up to the individual creators, depending on what their creative vision is for that piece and how they want it to execute I've seen it done both ways, basically. A lot of the times there is a current there's a current discussion around making sure that all players and all characters within, or basically that all players can have a character within a virtual environment that can reflect their personal identities. But then also there's the ability to go fantasy with it, and that's where, again, a 10-foot tall robot, like, I don't care if it looks like me or not, and that's ultimately, again, up to the director and how much identity you're trying to prescribe and buy-in you're trying to get. Like, is this supposed to be me in this experience? If it's like a touching breakup scene, maybe you don't want to be this disembodied 10-foot robot. Maybe you actually want to be that person that's and that can interact on a more like a more human level. I don't know. I mean, again, I think it's purely down to creative, and there are people, of course, working on that. Character mods are probably going to be a huge financial, like one of the few ways that you can actually make money in the future. So.
There's a certain technological barrier to a body in VR as it stands today, where if you have a Vive, you can, or an Oculus with touch controllers, you can hit a certain level of non-distractive body presence. The Book of Life thing that RealFX did like 2 years ago actually did a pretty good job of just using the positional tracking on the headset to give you a body. But any sort of pre-rendered, putting a body in is the worst decision in the world. It's the most distracting thing, and we could talk for an hour about why it's such a bad idea. But the vast majority of content that's being created today is pre-rendered, either animation or video. Some of it's even being rendered out of a game engine, so even though it's in a real-time engine, what you're viewing is not real-time. So all of those sort of make any sort of body insanely distracting and non-functional. So you need the body to at least be real time, even if the thing you're watching is not. So we're a little bit hobbled right now in terms of our ability to do that, in terms of in every experience to give you a body, give you a character, and that's why so many of these experiences have no sort of presence. Like they don't tell you who you are. They don't name you. They don't say like you're a white male, or you're a little girl. And that's because the body right now doesn't work in the vast majority of the content that's being created. That's going to change. It's certainly possible to do once you have hand controllers and you have a vague understanding of where the body is. It'll be incredible when we have full body tracking, like at least 16 point, but these are things that are going to take a while. And so I think we're going to be stuck in a very primitive era of giving you a body for a little while, and that's okay. It's going to take a while.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, I've seen, people put on a green suit and then they turn into a character, and I think that that's fun and exciting. But, from my perspective of watching, that's how it was fun. But I think, right now we're not able to do that in our experiences. So.
We have time for one quick question. Anyone? All right, well, panelists, that was an extraordinarily informative panel. I think you'd all agree. Big round of applause, and thank you very much.